Picture this. You're part of the most advanced galactic civilization anyone's ever known. 17 star systems under your control, technology that seems like magic, and peace that's lasted for centuries. Life's pretty good when you're at the top of the food chain, right? The Galactic Council had ruled these star systems for over 800 years. Their capital world, Zentera Prime, was a masterpiece of engineering, where floating cities drifted through crystal-clear skies and energy shields protected every citizen from even the smallest inconvenience. Crime was practically non-existent. Disease had been eliminated 3 centuries ago. Even natural disasters were controlled and redirected before they could cause any real damage. Their technology was the stuff of legends. Ships that could cross entire star systems in days. Weapons that could crack moons if needed. Medical devices that could regrow entire limbs in hours. The council members lived in perfect climate-controlled environments, had access to any food they could imagine, and enjoyed lifespans that stretched for centuries. But here's the thing about being comfortable for too long. You forget that the universe doesn't care about your comfort. The first reports came from the Outer Rim territories, places so far from the core worlds that most council members had never even bothered to visit them. Mining stations and agricultural colonies started going quiet. Not unusual, really. Equipment failures happened. Communication arrays broke down. Sometimes colonists just decided to pack up and move somewhere else. The local governors filed their standard reports. Minor technical difficulties on mining station Kappa 7. Investigating. Lost contact with agricultural colony Delta 9. Sending repair teams. Boring, everyday stuff that got buried in mountains of bureaucratic paperwork. Then something shows up that changes everything. The Galactic Council thought they'd seen it all until reports started flooding in about these crystalline entities. The first person to actually see them and survive was a freight pilot named Captain Rex Donovan. He was hauling supplies to a remote research station when he found the entire facility just gone. Not destroyed, not abandoned. Gone. Like someone had erased it from reality. What he found instead were these creatures that looked like living diamonds, each one about the size of a transport shuttle. They moved through space without any visible propulsion, flowing like liquid mercury, but sparkling like cut gems. Beautiful, in a terrifying sort of way. "Command!" Donovan's voice crackled over the communication array. "You're not going to believe this, but I think these things are eating the station. Like, literally consuming the metal and converting it into more themselves." The Council's response was predictably dismissive. They called them the Void Swarm and filed a report under Unconfirmed Frontier Phenomena. At first, nobody took it seriously. I mean, come on, some weird space bugs causing trouble on the frontier? That's what planetary defense grids are for. The Council had dealt with hostile life forms before. There had been the Silicon Hunters of Vega, 9 aggressive crystal entities that attacked mining operations. Those had been neutralized with standard plasma bombardment. Then there were the nightmare spores of the outer void, spaceborne organisms that tried to infect ship crews. A few well-placed antimatter charges had solved that problem permanently. But this was different. The swarm wasn't just aggressive. It was smart. Within weeks, the reports multiplied. Not just single sightings anymore, but coordinated attacks. The creatures seemed to appear out of nowhere, surrounding entire colonies before anyone could react. They didn't just destroy everything in their path. They learned from it. The first major engagement happened at Research Outpost Alpha 12. The facility commander, Colonel James Mitchell, was a 20-year veteran who'd seen action in every major conflict the Council had faced. When the swarm appeared, he followed protocol perfectly, activated the defense grid, called for backup, and engaged with everything he had. His energy cannons lit up the void, each blast powerful enough to vaporize a small asteroid. The weapons connected, washing over the crystalline entities in waves of superheated plasma. Mitchell watched his displays, waiting for the confirmation that the threat had been eliminated. Instead, the creatures absorbed every bit of energy and began to glow brighter. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice shaking, "the entities are showing increased energy signatures. They're not just surviving our weapons. They're feeding on them." But then 3 core worlds went completely dark in less than a month. Not Outer Rim colonies anymore. Not remote research stations. Core worlds. Planets with populations in the billions. Defended by the most advanced military installations in known space. Worlds that were supposed to be unsinkable. The first was Helios, for an industrial center that produced the Council's most advanced starships. The Planetary Defense Force detected the swarm approaching and launched everything they had. 15,000 fighters, 300 heavy cruisers, and orbital defense platforms that could glass entire continents. The battle lasted 6 hours. Then the planet's signals just stopped. When reconnaissance teams finally arrived, they found nothing but empty space where Helios used to be. Not destroyed. Not even debris fields. Just gone, like it had never existed at all. These weren't just random attacks. The swarm was smart, adaptive, learning from every weapon thrown at them. Worse yet, they were growing stronger with each planet they consumed. The Council's most sophisticated warships? Useless. Their energy weapons? The swarm absorbed them and came back hungrier than before. Suddenly, the galaxy's apex predators found themselves running scared. When you've exhausted every option and extinction is knocking at your door, you do things you never thought possible. For the Galactic Council, that meant breaking their most sacred rule: never contact unknown species beyond their borders. This wasn't just some bureaucratic guideline that got ignored when convenient. This was the founding principle of their entire civilization. 800 years earlier, when the Council first formed, they'd made a solemn promise to never reach beyond their established borders. Too many civilizations had fallen by making contact with hostile aliens. Too many species had been wiped out by diseases, wars, or cultural contamination from outsiders. The rule was carved into the walls of every council chamber in letters 10 feet tall. The known galaxy is our sanctuary. Beyond lies only chaos and death. But now, sitting in the emergency session chamber on Zentera Prime, the Council faced a choice that no previous generation had ever confronted: continue following their sacred law and watch their entire civilization get consumed, or break the most fundamental rule they'd ever created. Chairman Corval, a dignified leader who'd served for over a century, stood before the assembled delegates with hands that shook slightly. "Fellow council members," he began, his voice barely steady, "we face extinction. Our fleets are scattered. Our worlds are falling. Our weapons are useless." The chamber fell silent. These were the most powerful beings in known space, and they were admitting defeat. "I propose," Corval continued, "that we send distress signals beyond our borders. To anyone, everyone, any species advanced enough to receive them and powerful enough to help us." The reaction was immediate and explosive. Half the chamber erupted in protests. Council Member Theras of the Third Sector stood up, his voice booming. "You're asking us to abandon everything our ancestors died to protect. We don't know what's out there. We know what's in here," Corval shot back, "and it's killing us." The debate raged for hours, but in the end, survival won out over tradition. The vote was close, just 3 votes in favor of sending the signals. But it was enough. The distress signals went out across the void, desperate pleas for help from anyone, anywhere, who might have the power to stop the swarm. The Council's most powerful transmitters broadcasted in every frequency they could think of, using mathematical constants and basic physics, to make their message universal. "This is the Galactic Council of the Inner Systems." The message began: "We face extinction from an unknown enemy. We request immediate military assistance. We offer technology, resources, territory, anything in exchange or aid against this threat." The responses started coming within days. Most wearing them were disappointments that crushed their hopes a little more each time. The Andromedans replied first, but their message was short and brutal. "We are aware of your situation. This threat has reached our borders as well. We are evacuating our sector. You should do the same." Not exactly the cavalry they were hoping for. The Crystal Federation sent a more polite response. "The Federation sympathizes with your plight, but we lack the military capability to assist. Our thoughts are with you in these dark times." Thoughts and prayers. Great. A dozen other civilizations responded with variations of the same theme. Too far away to help. Too weak to fight. too scared to get involved. Some offered to take refugees, but only small numbers. Most didn't even bother responding at all. For 2 weeks, the Council watched their remaining worlds get picked off one by one, while waiting for anyone, to offer real help. Hope was dying along with their civilization. Then came a transmission from the Outer Rim that made every xenobiologist in the chamber go pale. The signal came from a sector so remote that most council members had assumed it was empty space. The transmission quality was rough, like it had traveled an incredible distance, and there was something about the voice that immediately set everyone on edge. It was too calm, too confident for someone responding to a desperate cry for help. "This is Commander Blake Harrison of the Sol 3 Defense Force. We received your distress call and are prepared to assist." Sol 3. The moment the designation appeared on the main screen, every database in the chamber started flagging warnings. The xenobiologists' faces went white as their computers pulled up the classification data. Class 12 Deathworld. Dr. Venice read from her display, her voice barely above a whisper. Atmospheric composition includes oxygen, nitrogen, and trace toxins. Surface gravity 1.2 standard units. Natural disasters include volcanic eruptions, earthquake activity, severe weather patterns, and... She paused, double-checking her readings, periodic impact events from space debris. The description continued, and it got worse with every line. The planet's surface temperature varied by over 100 degrees, depending on location and season. The weather systems were so violent they could level entire cities. The native life forms had evolved in constant competition, developing capabilities that seemed almost impossible. The dominant species, Dr. Venice continued, her voice getting quieter, appears to have evolved as persistence hunters. They lack natural weapons, claws, or armor, but show extreme endurance and adaptability. They're classified as pack hunters with tool-making abilities. Council member Veltar, a proud representative from one of the most advanced worlds in the inner systems, actually laughed when she saw the full classification. It wasn't a pleasant laugh. It was the kind of bitter sound someone makes when they realize a situation has gone from bad to completely absurd. "Deathworlders," she said, shaking her head. "We're so desperate that we're asking for help from primitives who live on a planet that should have killed them millions of years ago. What could savages from a hell world possibly do against the swarm?" She was about to find out. When the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace, it wasn't what anyone expected. The council delegates had gathered on the observation deck of Zentera Prime's orbital station, hoping to witness the arrival of their saviors. What they saw instead made several of them question whether they'd made a terrible mistake. These weren't the sleek, pristine vessels the council was used to seeing. Every ship in known space followed the same basic design principles. Smooth curves, polished surfaces, and elegant lines that spoke of advanced manufacturing and aesthetic perfection. The Council's own vessels looked like works of art, their hulls gleaming with energy shields and decorative elements that showed off their technological superiority. The human ships looked like they'd been through a war. Actually, that wasn't quite right. They looked like they'd been through dozens of wars and had been patched back together each time with whatever materials were available. Scarred hulls bore the marks of impacts that would have destroyed lesser vessels. Reinforced plating had been welded over obvious weak points, creating a patchwork appearance that was both functional and intimidating. "Are those external repair patches?" Council member Theras whispered, pointing at one of the larger human vessels. The ship's hull was covered in what looked like metal bandages, places where the original surface had been damaged and rebuilt stronger than before. Dr. Venice was studying the fleet through her instruments, and her readings only made things more confusing. "Their energy signatures are all wrong," she muttered. "These ships are running hot, way beyond normal operational parameters. Their power systems are generating enough energy to run a small city, but most of it seems to be going to life support." The weapon systems were perhaps the most shocking part. Where Council ships mounted elegant energy arrays and quantum disruptors, the human vessels bristled with what could only be described as crude projectile weapons. Massive rail guns, missile batteries, and what appeared to be some kind of chemical explosive launchers. By galactic standards, it was like bringing rocks and sticks to a laser fight. "Sir," The station's tactical officer reported to Chairman Corville. The lead vessel is requesting permission to dock. They want to meet in person. Corville hesitated. Everything about these humans screamed danger. Their ships were clearly built for violence. Their technology was primitive by Council standards, and they came from a world so hostile that it had been classified as unsurvivable. But with a swarm consuming another planet every few days, what choice did he have? Grant them permission, he decided, but keep our security teams on standby. Commander Harrison's first meeting with the Council was interesting. The human delegation consisted of just 3 people, which immediately set everyone on edge. When Council members traveled, they brought entire entourages, advisors, bodyguards, technical specialists, protocol officers. The humans just walked in wearing what looked like military uniforms, carrying simple data pads, and showing no signs of being impressed by the Council's grandeur. Harrison himself was nothing like what the Council expected from a military leader. He was average height for a human, with short cropped hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything without revealing any emotion. When Chairman Corville began the formal greeting ceremony, Harrison politely listened but clearly wanted to get straight to business. "We appreciate the protocols," Harrison said when the introductions were finally finished, "but we've reviewed your distress signal on the way here. Time seems to be a factor." The assembled delegates were practically hyperventilating about the swarm's invincibility as they launched into their briefing. They described the crystalline entity's adaptive abilities, their immunity to energy weapons, their ability to consume entire worlds and grow stronger with each victory. Every speaker emphasized how hopeless the situation had become, how nothing they'd tried had even slowed the swarm down. Harrison just sat there taking notes. Not once did he interrupt or ask for clarification. He didn't demand to see battle footage or request tactical analyses. He just listened and wrote things down on an actual paper notebook, which seemed impossibly primitive to the Council members with their quantum data systems. When they described how the entities thrived in hard vacuum and were immune to energy weapons, he nodded like they were discussing the weather. When they explained how the swarm adapted to every new weapon deployed against them, he made another note without any sign of concern. "You mentioned they reproduce in the upper atmospheres of dying worlds," Harrison said, completely calm. "What's their generation cycle?" The question caught everyone off guard. In all their discussions, all their desperate planning sessions, nobody had thought to study the swarm's reproduction. They'd been too busy running, too focused on finding weapons that could hurt the entities to wonder about how they multiplied. We don't know," Chairman Corville admitted, suddenly feeling foolish. "Our priority has been evacuation and defense." Harrison made another note. "What about their food sources? You said they consume planets. But what specifically do they target first?" Again, silence from the Council. Dr. Venice cleared her throat nervously. "They seem to attack population centers first, then industrial areas. We assumed they were just trying to eliminate resistance." Harrison wrote something else down. "And the consumed matter, does it get converted immediately, or is there a processing period?" The questions continued for over an hour, each one revealing another gap in the Council's knowledge about their enemy. Harrison's team didn't ask for better weapons or reinforcements. They didn't request access to the Council's most advanced technology or demand territorial concessions in exchange for their help. They just wanted biological data and target locations. "We'll need current locations of active swarm concentrations," Harrison said as the briefing wound down. "Detailed scans of their biological composition, if you have them. And we'll need to observe them in action before we commit to any specific strategy." As the meeting ended, Commander Harrison made a comment that sent chills through the chamber. He was packing up his primitive paper notebook, speaking almost casually to one of his subordinates. "Back home, we've got plenty of experience dealing with invasive species. The secret isn't fighting them where they're strongest." The way he said it, calm, confident, like he was discussing a minor pest control problem rather than an extinction-level threat, made every Council member suddenly wonder what kind of world could produce beings as unshakable in the face of cosmic horror. They were about to find out. What happened next violated every rule of civilized warfare the Council had ever written. For 8 centuries, the Galactic Council had fought conflicts with a certain level of dignity. Their wars were clean, efficient affairs conducted in the vacuum of space where collateral damage could be minimized and civilian populations protected. They used precise energy weapons, fought at safe distances, and always maintained proper protocols, even in the heat of battle. The humans threw all of that out the window on day one. Instead of engaging the swarm in space where they were most dangerous, the humans did something unthinkable. They followed them into the burning atmospheres of dying worlds. When the Council's tactical officers saw the human fleet's intended course, several of them thought there had been a navigation error. "Sir," Captain Torres reported to Chairman Corville, his voice shaking, "the human vessels are descending toward Kalos 7. The planet is currently under swarm attack. The surface conditions are—" He paused, checking his readings again. "The radiation levels alone would kill our crews in minutes." Kalos 7 was a nightmare scenario. The swarm had been consuming the planet for 3 days, turning its once beautiful cities into crystalline feeding grounds. The atmosphere was choked with toxic gases released by the conversion process. Electrical storms raged across the surface as the planet's magnetic field destabilized. The temperature readings fluctuated wildly between freezing and boiling depending on proximity to the swarm's activities. "Surely they're not planning to—" Council member Theras began, but his words died as they watched the human ships adjust their descent angle. They weren't making a mistake. They were diving straight into hell. Their ships plunged through radiation storms that would have cooked any other species alive, hunting the swarm where they thought they were safe. The Council fleets watched in horror as human vessels disappeared into toxic clouds that registered as instantly lethal on their scanners. Dr. Venice was glued to her instruments, trying to track the human ships through the interference. "This is impossible," she muttered. "The radiation levels down there are off the charts. The electromagnetic interference should have fried their electronics. The atmospheric pressure changes alone should have crushed their hulls. But Harrison's people weren't just surviving down there. They were thriving. The first indication that something remarkable was happening came through the communication arrays. Scattered transmissions broke through the static, brief reports from human pilots operating in conditions that should have been instantly fatal. Red leader to command. Came a voice through the crackling interference. "We've got visual on a swarm cluster. They're bigger down here than we expected, but they're also slower. The atmospheric interference seems to be affecting their coordination. The weapons they use weren't sophisticated energy arrays or quantum disruptors. The humans had brought tools that seemed almost primitive by galactic standards, but they turned out to be perfectly suited for the job at hand. Simple, brutal, and terrifyingly effective. Kinetic rounds fired at impossible velocities punched through the swarm's crystalline structures, like they were made of glass instead of the nearly indestructible material that had shrugged off the Council's best weapons. The humans had somehow calculated the exact velocity needed to overcome the entity's molecular cohesion, turning their own density against them. Chemical explosives were even more devastating. Instead of trying to destroy the swarm directly, the humans used compounds that turned the entity's own consumed matter into poison. The same adaptive ability that made them so dangerous in space became a liability when their own food source started killing them from within. Blue Squadron reporting. Another transmission crackled through. "We deployed the bioagents in Sector 7. The swarm entities are, well, they're dissolving. Whatever the lab boys cooked up, it's unraveling their molecular structure faster than they can adapt." The biological agents were perhaps the most impressive part of the human arsenal. While the Council had tried to fight the swarm with brute force, the humans had studied their enemies' weaknesses and exploited them with surgical precision. They developed compounds specifically designed to unravel crystalline molecular structures, turning the entity's own biology against them. Lieutenant Patricia Pat Rodriguez's transmission from inside a planetary firestorm summed up the entire operation perfectly. Her ship was operating in conditions that registered as immediately lethal on every Council scanner, surrounded by toxic gases and radiation that should have killed her crew instantly. "Command, we've located their primary hive," Rodriguez reported, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "The swarm's got a breeding complex built into the planet's core mining operations. They're using the existing infrastructure to accelerate their reproduction cycle, beginning extermination protocols." What followed was a masterclass in adaptive warfare. The humans didn't just attack the swarm. They systematically dismantled their entire operational structure. They targeted breeding sites, cut off supply lines, and eliminated key nodes in the entity's collective intelligence network. Where the Council had tried to outthink the swarm, the humans simply outlasted them. They fought in environments that would have killed any other species, using weapons designed for maximum effectiveness rather than elegance, and they did it all with a casual efficiency that terrified their galactic allies. How are they still alive down there? Council member Veltar whispered, watching the tactical displays as human ships continued operating in conditions that registered as unsurvivable. Dr. Venice had been studying the human bio readings throughout the battle, and her findings were disturbing. They're not just surviving, she said quietly. According to these scans, their stress hormones are actually decreasing. They're getting calmer as the fighting intensifies. That was when the Council realized they weren't just witnessing a military operation. They were watching apex predators in their natural element. 3 weeks later, it was over. The Void Swarm, the unstoppable force that had nearly driven entire species to extinction, was nothing but drifting debris in space. The cleanup operation was almost as shocking as the battle itself. While Council ships maintained a safe distance from the contaminated worlds, afraid of radiation exposure and toxic atmospheric conditions, the human crews went to work like they were doing routine maintenance. They descended to planet surfaces that still registered as lethal on every scanner, collecting swarm remains and neutralizing contamination sites with the same casual efficiency they'd shown during the fighting. Sir, Dr. Venice reported to Chairman Corville, the humans are actually walking around on Kalos, 7 without full environmental suits. Their readings show they're using basic breathing apparatus, but according to our measurements, the surface should still be uninhabitable. Through the observation screens, Council members watched human teams working in conditions that should have killed them. They were gathering samples, documenting the swarm's biological processes, and somehow managing to restore planetary systems that the Council had written off as permanently destroyed. Lieutenant Rodriguez's final report from the surface was typically matter-of-fact. Command, planetary cleanup is 90% complete. We've neutralized the remaining swarm fragments and restored atmospheric balance to acceptable levels. The locals should be able to resettle within 6 months. 6 months. The Council had estimated it would take decades to make those worlds habitable again, if it was even possible. The humans had done it in less than a month. But perhaps the most unsettling part wasn't their efficiency. It was their attitude. Throughout the entire operation, from first contact to final cleanup, the humans had treated the galaxy's greatest existential threat like a routine pest control problem. Commander Harrison's daily briefings sounded more like maintenance reports than military updates. Day 12 of operations, Harrison had reported earlier that week, swarm elimination proceeding on schedule. No casualties among human personnel. Local environmental restoration ahead of projected timelines. No casualties. Despite fighting in conditions that would have killed any other known species, despite diving into toxic atmospheres and radiation storms, despite engaging an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations, the humans hadn't lost a single person. As the human fleet prepared to return to their distant world, they declined every offer the grateful Council made. Territory, technology, trade agreements, none of it interested them. The Council's most valuable star systems, their most advanced scientific discoveries, their most profitable trade routes. The humans listened politely to every offer and turned them all down. You don't understand. Council member Theras had insisted during one particularly desperate negotiation session. We're offering you an entire sector. 3 inhabited worlds, unlimited mining rights, and access to our most advanced technologies. This is more wealth than most civilizations see in 1,000 years. Commander Harrison had looked at the holographic displays showing the offered territories, considered them for a moment, then shook his head. We appreciate the gesture, but we've got everything we need back home. Besides, someone needs to keep an eye on this sector of space. That last comment hit different. It wasn't said with any kind of threat or intimidation. Harrison delivered it the same way someone might mention they'd check on a neighbor's house while they were on vacation. Casual, matter of fact, like protecting an entire galactic sector was just Something you did because it was the right thing to do. The implications were staggering. The humans weren't interested in conquest, colonization, or even trade. They had technology that could devastate the galaxy's greatest threat, military capabilities that made the Council's forces look like toys, and they wanted nothing in return. Nothing except the knowledge that the galaxy was safe. Sir, Captain Torres had whispered to Chairman Corval during the final negotiations, what if they're not the only ones? What if there are other species out there like them? That thought kept the Council delegates awake for weeks afterward. If humans were considered primitive by their own standards, if their technology was basic, and their military was just a planetary defense force, what did that say about the rest of the galaxy beyond the Council's borders? As the human ships vanished into the cosmic dark, the Council delegates realized something that would change galactic politics forever. For 8 centuries, they had been the undisputed masters of known space. Their technology was the most advanced, their military was the strongest, their civilization was the pinnacle of galactic achievement. They weren't alone out here, and they definitely weren't the toughest kids on the block. Dr. Venice summarized it best in her final report. The humans represent a paradigm shift in our understanding of galactic civilization. Their capabilities suggest that habitable world classification systems may be fundamentally flawed. What we consider uninhabitable may actually produce the galaxy's most formidable species. The Council's entire worldview had been shattered and rebuilt in 3 weeks. They weren't the apex predators they thought they were. They were prey that had been lucky enough to avoid the attention of real predators. Until now. But here's the thing that really got to them. The humans didn't seem interested in being predators. They'd shown up, solved an impossible problem, and left without asking for anything in return. They demonstrated capabilities that could conquer the known galaxy, then politely declined to use them for personal gain. Somewhere in the void, the Deathworlders were watching, and if any other nightmare decided to threaten the galaxy, well, they knew who to call. The age of Council supremacy was over. The age of the Deathworlders had begun, and surprisingly, the galaxy felt safer than it had in centuries.